Hello, and welcome into a bonus episode of Meet Me in the Movies. I am Thomas Manning. Today, I'm bringing you a conversation I recently had with cinematographer Andrew Droz Palermo to discuss his work on the Marvel Studios series Moon Knight, starring Oscar Isaac in the lead role. Just a heads up, we do get into some spoilers in this interview, so if you haven't caught up through the first four episodes of Moon Knight, then I would say go back and watch those before you watch this interview. And I hope you guys enjoy the conversation. We had a really good discussion talking about a lot of the technical aspects of his work on Moon Knight, and also just narratively working with such a unique character like Mark Spector. Hope you guys enjoy, and thank you so much for watching. So one of the first things that really stood out to me in the visual style of a Moon Knight is the heavy use of reflections, and that's obviously a huge aspect of the character of Mark Spector and his different personalities and his internal conflict. So, what are some of the creative challenges for you as a cinematographer and storyteller working with reflections like that? And what do you just appreciate about those unique creative opportunities that you get working with those?
Yeah, I mean, you said it. It's a challenge. Not only just finding them and utilizing them, but making sure that you're out of them. The camera's out of them, or that your gear is out of them, or lighting, which looks good in real life, doesn't necessarily always look good in the mirror. You've got to think about the way you're lighting two sides of a face. But the huge challenge though is when Oscar as Mark or as Steven is talking to himself, or as Mr. Knight and Moon Knight, or whatever it may be. Getting him in the proper place, because what the camera sees in reflection is not what you actually see if you're standing in front of the mirror and you're looking at your own reflection. So finding the placements of those characters to put them within what appears to be talking to one another can be really funny. There's a lot of little cheats and things that you do constantly where they're actually totally 5 feet different from where they would be standing to see their own reflection. You're not standing in the exact same place. So that's like some technical challenge stuff. And then you kind of just feel it. You feel if it's looking right and feeling good and it's actually settled into a reflection which works, or it immediately if it's just cheating too much and it's false. But it's a fun challenge. I mean, both technically and just aesthetically, to find various reflections all over and utilizing them. It's a nice motif to have all throughout the show.
Yeah, and certain instances there's this really kind of dreamlike, ethereal atmosphere with the visual style, and it's a story that kind of blurs the lines between physical reality and the psychological realm. So I have to mention how much I love your work on The Green Knight. That was one of my favorite films
Thank
from
you, man.
last year, and just some of the best cinematography I've ever seen in my life.
Oh,
That's
wow. Thank
yeah,
you.
and that's also a story in The Green Knight that kind of straddles that line between the waking world and the dream landscape. So I'm wondering, are there any similarities in how you approach your work on Moon Knight compared to The Green Knight?
I tend to work very emotionally, or even instinctually. I try not to over intellectualize things. Like if it feels right, I don't try to question it, and I don't try to put it to words sometimes. Sometimes when you're shot listing, you have some ideas which may be a bit headier, and maybe they don't come across in the way you want, and vice versa. Some things appear to you on set that inspire you, and you don't necessarily have a justification, and you can justify it later, or you can make sense of it. But sometimes it's best not to, I find, not to put words to it, because it kind of spoils what makes it unique and interesting and beautiful. So that's all to just say that, like, I think my approach is often just from whatever document we have in our hand. What are the actors doing and what are we feeling is the best way to underline the emotion of the scene, to help the performers, or to add a mood to something that they can further the script. And so globally that looks the same between the two projects, but technically they're not the same in some ways. I'm sure if someone really put up some parallels in the imagery, I'm sure there are some, and that's just my own innate sense of beauty or aesthetic. And I do really like wides. I like wide shots, and I like it often when our character feels very small in a frame, and that worked for Gawain and the Green Knight, because that was kind of his emotional journey. He felt very small in this big world, and in some ways, the same is true, I'm sure, for Steven. Like when he's going into that storage locker in episode 2, I really wanted it to feel scary for him, and so we had these great wides of him very tiny, or when he's being chased by Conchu, he seems very small and alone, and so there's I guess some commonalities in that respect.
Yeah, no, you mentioned episode 2, which there are a few shots in there that really stood out to me was the first person POV shots that were incorporated. So what does it look like, setting those up and capturing those from your standpoint as the DP?
Yeah, I mean, I try to often first person stuff is not generally where my mind goes. I do like to feel the shoulder of someone, and sometimes I get a little in my head about the gaze of a camera and how it just doesn't feel like the gaze of a person. And I just I try to put myself in the character's shoes when I'm shooting a POV, and I really try to think, what would I be feeling? Am I anxious? Am I scattered? Am I, is there something that I can do with the camera that enhances the feeling that the character is feeling? Because otherwise I feel like you end up just making POVs or inserts as well. They just feel functional, that feels like you're laying bricks. And of course you have to do those kinds of things. But to me, for it to be like really grounded in character is where it gets more interesting. And you can add another layer than just information. So you kind of take each scene as it as it comes up, and what does one need over another, and what information are we trying to convey, and is there a subtle way to convey that information without just a full punch in to something that's just purely informational. So and for me, the best shots would wrap those shots into other ones, and that's kind of often my inspiration is to look at ways inserts can maybe start as an insert or a POV, but then a character moves into the shot, and then now it's actually an over the shoulder, or now it's a single or a 2-shot or whatever it may be. But to wrap those shots into other ones so that it's not full cutaways to something. And I think that's the thing that I've been pushing for in my work lately.
Yeah, and with the Moon Knight suit, it's such a huge important aspect of the character, obviously. And so what is it like for you shooting and lighting the suit, in the moment during production, and just making sure that the utmost respect is paid to something that's that significant to the character?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully the suit was great. I mean, I really think it's a beautiful suit, and Mr. Knight's suit as well. The attention to detail. I actually shot more of Mr. Knight's suit than I did Moon Knight's suit in some ways. The action sequence in episode 2, where there's sort of a rooftop chase, and those were things which were storyboarded both in advance before Justin and Aaron and I were on board, but also with our input. However, we didn't shoot it. Second unit came in, and Darren and Paul, this director, and Darren's the DP, are both incredibly talented. They took that information and ran with it from there. So what would have been a lot of my shots of Moon Knight were actually done by second unit, and beautifully done so. But to answer your question, though, I think like one of the toughest challenges is it's a white suit. And you want it to have contrast. You want it to not just be a big white wash. At the same time, color contrast is challenging, because if I have a big sodium light, let's say from the London streets, and a lot of the London streets is a very warm, white sequence, and takes on all of that sodium color, and it just doesn't feel right when he's kind of a big orange knight instead of Moon Knight and white. So keeping that balance was really challenging, and that's also where coloring in post-production really helps, is we can kind of isolate him and move him a bit more neutral, or decide how much we want the environment to take on. But again, it's an embarrassment of riches with that suit, and Mr. Knight's suit as well, and Megan, and the whole costume department were just incredible. So it's easy to make something look good when it already comes off the truck, or comes out of the trailer looking amazing.
Yeah, and in episode 4, a lot of the action is set out in the desert. There's scenes in the canyons there. So how much of this was shot on location, and how did that impact the way that you use natural lighting in your shoot?
Yeah, so we as a unit traveled. We shot in Budapest largely, so all the studio stuff was in Budapest, and as well as some London streets stuff we shot in Budapest as well. But we moved to Jordan at the end of production, and we were there for a few weeks, I think almost a month maybe, and in total from scouting and shooting. So a lot of that stuff is on location in Jordan and Wadi Rum, which is a famous desert that Star Wars is shot in, and Lawrence of Arabia is a lot of it's staged there. And we were staying in Aqaba and shooting in this desert, which was about an hour from our hotel. So for me in those instances, I want to just be as wide as I can. I want to soak up the world and really go, enjoy the vistas that we're given, because they're just so incredible. So, and I try to just let everything do its, go as natural as I can. And a lot of that stuff is just about scheduling. The further I get along in my career, I realize that if I really track what the son's up to, and I really work with the assistant director and the producers and the directors about scheduling, we can have the light which is best for each location if we're really conscious of it. And of course, you're going to end up in times where it's overhead and it's just slamming down on you, and that's just how it is given the time you have to shoot a show. But if the light's low and coming from the right direction, you're already at least headed the right way, and most of my job is done. I just need to maybe add a little nuance and bounce or a little diffusion, but I try not to do too much.
Yeah, and you get to play around with some different genres in the fourth episode as well. Parts of it reminded me of an Indiana Jones type adventure, exploring the tomb. Then it kind of veers into the horror genre territory as well.
Yeah.
So what were some of your favorite elements of having this chance to flex your genre muscles and play around in different sandboxes like that?
Yeah, it's fun. That kind of genre bouncing is really fun, and for me, it's just a matter of how far can we go in each direction without it all falling apart, feeling like, oh, now we're National Treasure, or now we're some monster movie, and we want to still be in the pocket of Moon Knight, but the degrees of it is really the challenge, and the tone is tough to control. But for me, lighting those things is the real fun part. Getting one of my favorite scenes in that sequence is just a really simple one. Then when they first rappel into that first chamber with the sphinxes, and that was shot on stage, but to light that was really fun, just to have all this natural warm light pouring in. So that's kind of been the joy for me lately, is lighting, is really getting to make a world with light, and try to make a world that's emotive or scary in the instance of some of the more horror elements, and how far are we willing to go dark. And for me, a scene like that, you should really struggle to see, because the characters should be, they are flashlight only, and that's how they're effective, is when you see less. So we try to push into or out of people's comfort zone about how dark we want to go on a show like this. So
yeah, and then by the end of the episode, with the big twist, it completely transitions almost into the psychological thriller type genre. So
yeah.
kind of walk me through this process of suddenly shifting the entire visual style, because you go into the clean white backgrounds of the mental hospital, and you have some extreme close-ups. So just what was that transition process like?
Yeah, we did a lot of testing, and that was a collaboration with Stefania, the production designer, and knowing that we wanted the lights to be built into the set, and it's a real, again, it's how far do we want to go in one direction or another. And we didn't want it to go full psychedelic, but we also wanted it to feel actually maybe like a curative place. It shouldn't feel dark and scary, so we felt white and clinical, but not too clinical. And testing all those lights was a real challenge for us, making sure that we had enough exposure, that it had some color different shifts. Really, it's all a variety of white, but how warm or how cool. And Greg Middleton, the other DP, and I spent a lot of time with the overheads in that space, as well as in Harrow's office, trying to find ways to give it some color contrast while still being a bright white space. That stuff's really fun, and one of the great things about a project of this size is you have the time and resources to do that. My career in the past, like Green Knight, you mentioned earlier, sometimes I walk into a set and it's the first time I've seen the set now finally complete, and I have to light it real quickly, and then an hour later we're shooting. So to have the time in pre-production or as the set's finished weeks in advance of shooting, to see it on nights or on weekends or whatever it may be is a real treat for me. So I can explore and I can change my mind, which everyone moans about when you ask for a change and it causes the whole set to change. But you can theorize what something may look like, but until you're actually there or until you start seeing lights come up, you just can't know exactly. And I try not to change my mind very often, but occasionally it does happen.
Yeah, and you mentioned the other cinematographer, Greg Middleton, who's worked on the series. So how much do you communicate with the other DPs who shoot the other episodes? Like, from your shoot to the shoots on the other episodes, just what kind of communication is there?
Yeah, tons of communication. And from the very beginning, Greg and I were talking often, and from everything from gear stuff of what gear might I want, what gear might he want, are there other things? What are we kind of feeling? Passing inspirations back and forth. Or once Greg started shooting, because he started before me for episode 1. Even just simple things like complimenting certain things that we thought were going really great, or if he had some intel on something that he was trying but it wasn't totally successful, he would let me know. Or that was a really great collaboration. And it's rare actually that you get to see another cinematographer work, because we normally work by ourselves, and so it was really great for me and a real education. I mean, Greg is much more veteran. He's been working longer. He's shot a lot of things and a lot of different genres, and he has a very different way of working than I do. And I feel like I learned a lot and some great tips. And at the same time, as someone who is as talented as he is and as far along in his career as he is, he was completely open. He didn't say, here is this Bible of how I want the show to look, and these are the parameters, and you cannot go outside of this. He was very giving and allowing us to find our own voice within the show. And our directors, Justin and Aaron, versus him and Muhammad. So I really value that relationship.
And also generally have to ask about working with, Oscar Isaac and Ethan Hawke, just two incredible talents. And Oscar's performance allows him to do a lot of really unique things, just very idiosyncratic things with his performance. And then Ethan Hawke is just always phenomenal. So just what's it like working with them and capturing those performances on set?
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, all I can do in my job is to just set up and give them as much space as I'm able to give them, and to take as little of their time for me lighting or for me moving cameras, or, also just to react. So when they come in and they block a scene and it's different than I envisioned, I need to stay on my toes and be reflexive to what they're bringing. Because, these guys are incredible talents, and I want to just underline certain things that they're doing, or to not box them into some preconceived notion that I had about where they might be or what they might do. So, it was a real joy. Both of those guys were incredibly prepared, and Ethan and Oscar both, just every time, they'd sit into a scene, it just suddenly felt real to me. They embodied those characters, and they brought so much. And Oscar, of course, had to go to some places emotionally, and to see him come out of his trailer already there, he's not the kind of actor, and many actors are this way, that can just joke and be in a totally different mood, and then when you say action, they're a totally different person. Oscar, kind of from the moment he's coming out of his trailer all the way into the scene, he's already in character. He's at least more or less mentally in that headspace. And so, for me, that's super impressive just to see, and not to say that the other way isn't impressive as well, because that shift of gears is incredible. But, he just really needed to go to some places. And so you could feel it when, let's say, in Harrow's office and he's, trying to piece things together, there was a real quiet around set because we know it's kind of sensitive. He's really going to try to go to a place, and that's a real joy to capture those things.
Well, Andrew, again, just want to thank you for your time today and for great conversation. And just big fan of your work. Anytime you show up in a project, in the credits, it's always, your work is always noticeable. And just thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you, man. That's very nice of you to say. I'm glad it's noticeable, and hopefully not noticeable in a bad way, not sticking out. But yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir. Hope you have a
All
great
right,
day. Man. And yeah.
Thank you. Cheers.
Won't you come and meet me at the movies? Won't you come and watch a